right, guys, welcome back to Critical Thinking. We're going to talk about developing yourself as a critical thinker and also look at the problem solving steps. Okay, so there's some strategies. You really want to reflect and practice. So, again, reading something and then really not just taking it as surface value. Oh, okay. But really thinking, do I think this? What do I think about this? Using the questions that we talked about in the last video. Use your wasted time. So this is the kind of time to use that reflect and practice. If you're just chilling, scrolling around on TikTok, maybe use that time to look up different sources. So if you see something on TikTok that tells you the sky is falling, maybe get up and look out the window and see if the sky is falling. Maybe look at some other sources to see if the sky is falling. You can use that kind of free time as you're just kind of scrolling through. And I call it marinating. Sometimes when I'm just chilling, my brain's I'm thinking about different arguments for a paper or how I might want to construct stuff, anything like that. You really need to redefine the way you see things. We're really, how do I say this? We really are seeing ourselves as we're right and everybody else is wrong, and that's very dangerous. None of us can be 100% right. This world, this country was built on so many different perspectives and opinions and ways of life. So we need to be cognizant. We need to be aware of that. We need to be open to changing our mind. I think that's the biggest thing is we've sort of gotten into a world where we've drawn a line in the sand and you have to be on one side or the other, and that's it. That's the final decision for the rest of your life. And that's not right. So really be open to different perspectives, to different challenges. You're going to hear things in classes that you don't agree with. You're going to hear things in classes that you just want to yell and scream, especially when you get into some courses. Government's an easy one right now, talking about different policies and different politicians. There's going to be a lot of like triggery and challenging things in those courses, but you have to be open to hearing those other people, and you have to be open to changing your perspective, redefining your perspective. Maybe you see see everything as one way, and you can at a minimum we can empathize why somebody sees something the other way. At a minimum, analyze the influences of thinking in your life. So for a lot of us, this comes directly from our immediate family members who raised us. That doesn't always make them right, or that doesn't always mean that you have to think exactly like them. It's about getting in the world and developing your own a little bit. Who has those influences? Is it friends? Is it families? Is it teachers? I will tell you, teachers aren't 100% right. And so it's okay to be skeptical. It's okay to disagree. Of course, there's ways to disagree, and we'll go into that with express yourself. You can tactfully disagree. I will tell you that freedom of speech is not freedom of consequence. So we have students in classes that think that they can yell or storm out, throw things, and that's not the right way of expressing yourself. There are consequences for that. It usually ends them in the dean's office. And so thinking about how you say things, how you write your things, expressing yourself on social media, and I keep going back to that because I think that's so key to what we're doing in the world right now. And it does affect us academically. It does affect the way we see things and think about things. Again, these algorithms are meant to keep you engaged, so they send you things that they want you to click on, and it does affect the way you see the world. It does affect the way that you're going to approach your homework and what you're going to write and the arguments you're going to make. Those are all the ways that we express ourselves. So think about what you're putting out there is probably my biggest piece of advice, because you have your followers, whether it's somewhere on like Twitter where it's a bunch of followers you've never met in real life, or it's something like Facebook where maybe it's family and friends. You're putting stuff out there that people might be taking as fact. So you have to be, to me, you have to be prepared to defend it. If I post something, it's something I believe in, and I'm prepared to defend it. Not that I want to engage with a Facebook troll, but I can say, this is why I think that. This is why I agree with this person, and not just, oh no, it looked cool. And then enhance your wellness. All critical thinking comes with that life balance. So be sure to take care of yourself. It will make you clearer, it make you more open. Be willing to open, which means you have to be rested. You can't be emotionally exhausted. None of us are open to hear somebody else's perspective or emotionally exhausted. So we do need to keep ourselves in check. take care of yourself so you can take care of others. And critical thinking comes into all of that because you have to figure out your needs and their needs, and what it means for what you're doing. So critical thinking affects all areas of our life. It's not specific to your academic work, it's not specific to what you're doing in class, and you should be carrying it everywhere. All right, so creative thinking is one of my favorites. This is the one that I'm so sad we're not in person because I have different activities for this. But it really is thinking outside the box. We've heard this. We want to develop different ways to look at things because it expands our solutions when we're talking about solving a problem. And it's very easy to get stuck in a bubble and think there's, one or two ways of doing things. But expanding our options, expanding our critical thinking will just give us more solutions. Be like, oh, I didn't realize I could do it that way. That is much easier. It can be a skill. Some of us don't naturally look at the world and think of 80 different ways to solve it or to add to it, but it can be practiced. What it just takes, and I think all of you as learners have a lot of this, is being curious, being optimistic that it can happen, a little bit imaginative, and then persistent. You're not going to look at something and have that light bulb moment every time and boom, fixed it, done. It's going to take some time, and sometimes, it could take weeks, months, depending on how deep the problem is or how deep the thing that you're working on. Maybe it's just crafting a paper. There's creative thinking. There's so much creative thinking involved with crafting a paper and crafting your arguments and making original points and getting your data together. And so you've got to keep working on it. That's why when we talk about writing, we talk about it as a process. Those papers that you're hammering out at midnight, an hour before they're due, are not good papers. You might be a good writer, it might be a strength, and they might be grammatically and they might organizationally make sense. But they're only going to get you so far because as you move through those classes and you move up through Bloom's taxonomy and analyzing and evaluating, you're going to have to get more creative because you're going to start looking for more than what did the book say and what do you think. But then it's going to be what did the book say, what do you think, and how does that add to new information, new ways of looking at this subject. So, of course, you need sleep. College students usually are in one or two categories: too much sleep or not enough sleep, just depending on your life. So, be really careful that you want to be rested so you can be open to creative thinking. So, make sure that you try to get your sleep, and this is something that we all struggle with. Exercise helps. I have found, and by exercise, I don't mean that you need to join a gym and you need to be there 7 days a week and you need to run marathons. Exercise is going to be different for every single one of you. I think a lot of us are kind of learning this in COVID to take a mental break and go for a walk or whatever. I have found during the work day, if I take a break and go exercise, it mentally releases me from work, and it gives both my body and my brain that break that I need, and then I come back re-energized to work. So make sure that you have some sort of exercise in your routine. Simple as walking. I don't know if you have a trampoline or a jump rope. It can be very, very simple. Or if you're really into working out, and that really is a lot of us, that's one of our mental coping mechanisms as well, then make sure you build that in. Don't sacrifice it for your paper. Build it in. One thing that I used to do, if you have the means, is I would take whatever I was reading, my research, to the gym. And my cardio, which is the thing that I hate doing cardio, hate being on a machine, not going anywhere. That's when I would read. It would make my time go by faster, and I was sort of getting that done because the cardio doesn't require a lot of thought, right? Once I'm on the machine walking, I don't have to think about it. And so that would give my brain something to do because I would get bored, and I was sort of multitasking, right? We talked about that previously. It really is switch tasking, but my walking doesn't require any mental energy, so I had that place to put it. Allow your mind to wander. That's where we get a lot of our creative thinking, is just allow to go through. You'll see that in the video, how fun it is, the where great ideas come from, how we can take one thing and keep working on it, keep thinking about it, keep just sort of, like I said, I call it marinating it, where you're not really paying attention to it, but your brain sort of is. and what kind of things it can change it into. Of course, keep learning. The more you know, right? The more you're able to apply to that situation, that problem, that argument that you're working on, that paper you're working on. Keep learning, and that means both in the class and that means outside of the class. Take risks, join an organization if you can, so you can connect with more people. If that's not your speed, keep learning online. I know people who enjoy watching documentaries. I like them here or there, but some people really enjoy learning through that, and that's perfectly fine. Documentaries are very careful about being biased, so you definitely want to apply the things that we talked about, the CRAP test, and doing some of your own research. Definitely a great way to learn and stimulate those creative thinking skills. Um, Put yourself, again, take risk. Nerve-wracking situations, take risk. This is how you learn what you really can do. Whether it's signing up for a difficult project or, like I said, joining a group so that you're surrounded by strangers, whatever it is that kind of puts you out there, that's how you learn the most about yourself and what you're able to do. And then if you can, especially if you're doing heavy research projects, keep a notebook with you. And you can even keep one. I keep one on my phone. I use a notepad. And so when I'm out, you know, not at home, not near a computer, and I sort of have an aha moment thinking about my research or whatever, I make a note so that, because as soon as you get back to your computer, you're going to completely forget whatever that moment was. So make notes sometimes, or I email them to myself so that they pop up on my notifications for me later. You can do any of those combination of things, but you're gonna have walking through the park. You're gonna have a oh hell, that's a good idea moment, and so record that somewhere. Have something to be able to record it so that then you can move on with your thought and come back and really delve into it later. In search of creativity, you're gonna fail a lot, um, and it's important to be okay with that. Um, you're gonna there's no doing it poorly, but you do have to, like I said, have the persistence, use that wasted time. It's okay to be messy with your creative thinking, and you're gonna make mistakes because mistakes are the ways to learn from and improve. Think about your smartphone. All right, the very first smartphone compared to the ones we have today is probably crap. I believe the iPhone was the very first smartphone, at least from what I remember, and it didn't do any of the stuff that our phones do now. And before the iPhone was the iPod, and most of you are probably too young to remember, but they were small bricks. They were big, and they only played music. They didn't do anything else. So you had a phone. There was a time you had a phone, you had an iPod, and you had a digital camera when you were out, because that was a way to listen to music, make phone calls, and take selfies. All of those were things that evolved, and some of them were dumb and clunky, or mistakes were made in the creation, and that made the newer version that created the smartphone, and then they used those and they learned more. And let's not lie, right? We Whether you're Android or Apple, there's been versions of the phone that have been crap, and they learn from that and they make a newer version, or they make a software update. You're going to make mistakes with creative thinking, and that tells you what didn't work so that you can move forward with what did work. Um, and then forget everything that you learned. That really just means don't box yourself in for things that you have learned. Not necessarily forget, right? But very often, there's not one way to do things. So, what I usually talk about is college. There's not one way to college. And that is the beauty of somewhere like ACC, where we can come to college right after high school, or we can take a break and go work, or I've had students go in the military, have families, and then they come back. There's not one way to college. You can do it part-time, full-time, online, hybrid. You do what works for you, and that's a great example of being creative with your schedule and what your options are so that you can hit those goals. Because we've all been given, I think, the narrative growing up that you go to school, you go to high school, you go to college, you go to a 4-year college, you get a degree, and you get a corner office, and that's crap. That's not at all how it works. So be sure that whatever you're working on, whether it's your paper, your argument, whether it's a problem you're trying to solve, kind of take a minute for your creative thinking piece and forget everything you've learned about this and try to approach it as it's the first time you're hearing it. And what kind of questions would you ask? And what kind of things would you think? And you'd be surprised at what you might come up with. It maybe you're like, oh, I need to explore this more, or oh, this is so obvious, right? We've all heard the phrase, it was right in front of me. Sometimes those barriers we put in ourselves because we're like, nope, this must be the only answer because that's what we've learned. All right. And finally, critical thinking and problem solving. This is another one of my favorite activities in class because we would start off with defining the problem. And so often what I use in class, and we solve it as a class, so we have a student who is doing poorly in their courses. Okay. And it's about midway through the semester, and they're having problems doing their homework and coming to class, let's say. And so we then go into identify available solutions, okay? And this is the part, this is where we talk about forget what you learned. This is where you list everything that you think of as a solution, good, bad, and ugly. List them all. It is pure brainstorming and these solutions. So this is where we do everything from going to the learning lab, using academic coaching, dropping all your courses. I almost always have a student that says bribe the professors, and I write it down. I write it down because we are writing all ideas at this point. Reduce your hours, take a break. We write all these solutions, and then we get to this last part, which is also what we call practical thinking when you select your solution. The solution you select has to make sense for you. So if you're working 40 hours a week and you're taking four courses and you're doing poorly because you have no time for homework, probably going to the learning lab isn't going to help because that's one more thing you have to make time for. Probably in that situation, you would want to consider if a possibility cutting work hours. A lot of times that doesn't always work out for us because we all need to eat. Sometimes it's slowing down and taking less courses per semester. That can be a solution. Sometimes going to the learning lab is the solution. Sometimes it's when you leave campus and you go home and you put your book back down and your homework is out of sight, out of mind. Whereas if you go to the learning lab, you put yourself in a situation where you either have to sit there and stare at everybody or you have to do your homework. And sometimes you just need that. You need to create the space that kind of forces you to do your homework. Those ones. For the bribe the professor, I always ask my class, who in here can afford to bribe a professor what community college student can afford to bribe a professor? And it would have to be enough for the professor to risk losing their job. And nobody ever can, and we always mark it off. And that's always kind of the fun of it. But that is the problem solving, is really taking that minute, not that gut reaction. This is hard, I'm going to drop everything. But taking the time and figuring out. I've had students that figure out that a specific class just takes too much of their time. And so they drop it for that semester so that they can improve their grades on their other 3 courses. And then they take it the next semester with maybe just 1 other course instead of 3 other courses, so they can give it the time that it deserves. That's problem solving, looking at it different ways and then really just finding the solution that works for you. Because if you pick a solution, so like I said, if you're working full time and going to school full time, and then your solution is to go to the learning lab, and then you never make it in the learning lab because you're freaking tired, and rightfully so, that's not a solution that's going to work for you. And then you don't really change the course of your path for that semester. All right, so key takeaways, critical thinking using that logical and reflective skills. It's evaluating information because information is complex. And then, like I said, right now it's messy and you're getting a lot of it, whether you want it or not. Contribute to our ability to solve problems and really make things, kind of simplify things when you you're able to look at things like big picture. What is my degree goal? What is my transfer goal? What is happening this semester and next semester? And then small, what is happening this week and next week, and how can I work with that? And then take those actions to develop and strengthen those critical thinking skills. Practicing the creative thinking, getting both creative and critical thinking. I want you to practice them in all of your courses, and then you'll start seeing you naturally start using them outside of college. Whether it's your social media interactions with friends or family, I promise you will become super annoying, but you'll win the most arguments. And then take those actions to develop and strengthen your critical and creative thinking skills. All right, guys, thanks so much. That is all for Chapter 7. This stuff's pretty heavy, so make sure you read it probably a couple of times and really understand it. And I appreciate your time. Thanks.